The drumbeats of war that we were just talking about should bring important and pointed questions, just like about the mask debate. And no matter what you think about Ukraine or Russia or China, when the President of the United States says the following, whatever you think of President Biden, when the President says this, pay attention.
If he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
President Biden reaffirmed that American troops would not go to help Ukraine. The fragile former Soviet satellite is on its own to fight 100,000 Russian troops ready to roll into the eastern part of that country. There are some American weapons that have been delivered, but that's about it. Mr. Biden promised massive economic sanctions against Vladimir Putin, and 8,500 American troops are now on alert as a show of strength to reinforce NATO. Ukraine is not part of NATO. Now is where things get a little complicated. Over on Fox, Tucker Carlson can't seem to understand why Russia invading Ukraine is problematic for the United States.
Ukraine is strategically irrelevant to the United States. No rational person could defend a war with Russia over Ukraine. Nobody thinks a war like that would make America safer or stronger or more prosperous. The Chinese must be watching this happen with their jaws open, completely delighted.
He might be right, but for the wrong reason. The Chinese are completely delighted because of how little the Biden administration is actually doing. But leave that to the side for just a second, because Brianna Keilar at CNN couldn't help herself. Tucker is Putin's puppet, she says.
The real question here may be, why is Rupert Murdoch allowing this anti-democratic BS on the air there? Here we are talking about him, which I think is exactly what he wants, and maybe that's why he says some of this craziness.
And Brianna, you certainly oblige him. As we said, these are serious times. They require serious questions, legitimate questions from Tucker, and more importantly, serious answers. Why to go to war over Ukraine? Because if you show Putin you are willing to go to war, you don't have to. He's a bully. When you stand up to him, he backs down. President Trump actually did that. If you show the world America stands up for our allies, the world is a better place. Just look at the peace and prosperity from the early 1980s all the way through the mid-2000s, Republicans and Democrats. Tucker's right. Xi of China is grinning ear to ear. Probably even a bigger grin than in those pictures. Mr. Biden is giving him the Olympics. NBC will cover it wall to wall with glowing coverage, and his buddy Putin will embarrass the United States by taking over Ukraine despite President Biden's strong words. Joining us now, Bruen, former director of global engagement in the Obama White House. Brett, we've known each other for a long time, so we could speak candidly. Did I get anything wrong?
You know, it's funny, Leland, I remember when I was still at the White House and we were out, I think, in Farragut Park chatting about Russia. So, yes, we've had this conversation going back for a while. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of the same mistakes that we made back in 2014 replaying themselves again and again here. We talk about, strong economic sanctions, and yet there's no evidence that economic sanctions have changed the Kremlin's calculus. So we've got to start looking at other options. We also, quite frankly, have to be a lot more careful about the consequences for our allies, because there are a lot of European leaders right now that are very worried about whether or not Ukraine will be Putin's last stop.
All right. Give the White House its due. We're going to talk about Ron Klain and the rest of the administration in a minute. But President Biden's an old foreign policy hand. He's been at this 40 years. He saw how Putin embarrassed President Obama in Ukraine in 2014. Is it that they just can't learn? They don't want to learn? They're not willing to have the cost? Why repeat the same mistakes?
Well, look, I think part of the problem is that too many on Biden's team have not realized that the world has changed remarkably in the last several years. And so you don't have, unfortunately, some of our career diplomats who've been out there working on the front lines for the past few years. You don't have a diversity of experience in the situation room. And so we're getting into the same problems.
I hate to make this political because this is so serious, but the whole campaign, the whole premise of the Biden campaign was the adults will be back in the room, America will be back. I can just imagine that if President Trump was in office right now and this was happening, and his response, President Trump's response, was what Biden was doing right now, Democrats would be up in arms.
Well, and it's interesting because we're seeing a lot of the same isolationist, disengaged strategies that President Trump had advanced, now coming out of the Biden White House. The fact of the matter is, and we've seen this going back to Biden's summit in Geneva with Putin over the summer, is essentially his message to Russia and to a whole lot of other countries is, keep it on the down low. I don't want to have to deal with major international crises. So, they slap a few sanctions on and call it a day. And that's why we continue to find ourselves in the same situation, the same crises again and again.
The one thing that struck me that was slightly different about President Trump's policy towards Russia is they killed 300 of Putin's mercenaries in Syria. That was an order from President Trump. And after that, Putin didn't really make that much mischief around the world. Is there some lesson to be learned that he's got to get a bloody nose at some point?
Absolutely. And I think we have to realize that this notion of offering Putin an off-ramp is not going to work. We've been trying it since the days
he doesn't want one.
of his Crimean invasion. He's not going to take it. He's going to take the off-ramp, and then he's going to accelerate down the highway. So we've got to come up with some real punishments that are going to make a difference.
Hey, Brett, one of the reasons we're friends and we've been talking since 2014 is because you tell the truth, whether it's good for your team or not. And I know President Obama always appreciated that, and we appreciate it here. Good to see you. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.